So in 1971, when Nixon closed the gold window in August 15, that was the main message was that America was bankrupt. The question people have to ask themselves, is it possible to print wealth out of nothing or not? That's what the central banks are telling us. I mean, at the end of the day, the redistribution means you are stealing from the productive people. That's the geopolitical power shift that we are witnessing for 20 years already. You know, I mean, the gold is basically moving west to east. And now we have seen that the Chinese were announcing, you know, that the oil contracts, the future oil contracts will be traded in renminbi.
How do you legally move a few dollars or millions of dollars in the U.S. banking system without it being tracked back to you? I've been showing people how to get financial privacy, financial anonymity, in fact, for 25 years. I get people out of debt situations, even during the middle of a levy or lawsuit. Then I create a legal fortress around the cash flow and assets that cannot be broken, even by the IRS. For some professionals and small business owners, I even have to use the dark web to handle large transactions invisibly. If you're still the personal signer for any bank account or not using the dark web for business, you're a sitting duck. Visit me at aceofcoins.com to learn the secrets to total financial privacy.
Well, okay, let's get into some economic issues, because I know this is your forte, but Switzerland, of course, but also global economic issues. And, you know, the dollar is the main currency in the world. I mean, is the strongest, the dominant currency. And it's widely believed that the dollar needs to be reset. Do you think it does? And when will that occur?
Yeah, the crystal ball. At the end of the day, you know, when you look, I mean, of course, the dollar, you know, 65% of all the world's currency reserves are held in US dollars on a global scale. So the dollar is the biggest problem. You know, I mean, when the Americans basically won the empire over from the Brits, latest by, you know, with the Second World War, and then you had the Marshall Plan. So basically the whole, you know, Europe was destroyed, Japan was destroyed, the United States had the backbone, they had the industry, they never had a war over there, at least, you know, not a world war. And so they were able to, you know, to flood the market with US dollars, because also in Bretton Woods, the conference in Bretton Woods basically was decided in 1944 that the US dollar is as good as physical gold. And after the Second World War, America had 70% of all the gold reserves of the free world were in the United States. So that's why the US dollar became the world currency reserve, because it was exchangeable into, you know, central banks were allowed to basically ask, instead of physical, you know, paper dollars, they were allowed to ask for physical gold. And so in 1971, when Nixon closed the gold window in August 15, that was the main message, was that America was bankrupt. And so since 1971, basically...
Although we went on to, not to interrupt you, but we created the petrodollar at that point, and oil was our backing, but keep going.
Absolutely. You know, so the gold backing basically was replaced. You had also, you know, the policy changed towards the Soviet Union in 1973. Then you had Kissinger going to China in 1971, 70, before they closed the gold window. So they opened up China for foreign investments. So they were able, you know, to spread the dollar, backed up by the oil with the Saudi and OPEC. That's the point. But since then, you know, I mean, when you look at the total, the funded liabilities of the United States, which are right now roughly 21 trillion, that's only the funded liabilities. 98.5% have been created since 1971, since the Americans went off. So I mean, the whole world is based. I mean, Charles de Gaulle said, you know, that's the exorbitant privilege, that the Americans basically can print money out of thin air and just consume, send the dollars out. And so that has created a world economy based on credit on a global scale. And so, you know, even when you look at the total credit 2008, which stood at roughly at 160 trillion. Now, 10 years later, we are standing at 233, 240 trillion. So it's exponential. And, you know, what the people have to ask themselves, that's coming back to your question, is the dollar going to see a reset? When is it going to happen? I don't know when it will happen, but it will happen. That's not the issue, because if, the question people have to ask themselves, is it possible to print wealth out of nothing or not? That's what the central banks are telling us. If that would be the case, so why don't the central banks hand over $1 million each of us on an annual per year, and we can all live a happy life? When you look at how many trillions they injected into the economy, I mean, it's just a joke. So that's why we see, whenever they print money, it's a redistribution. And at the end of the day, the redistribution means you are stealing from the productive people. You are stealing from the guys who are earning a fixed salary. And you basically hand it over to the financial institutions. You bail out the banks. You hand it over to the 1%, to the big multinational companies, which can lend money for almost zero. But the small and mid-cap companies, they have to pay much higher interest rates. So it's going out. I mean, it's like a scissor. So one day it will crash. And we have cycles. So we have, for everything we have cycles. We have short-term debt cycles. We have long-term debt cycles, which we even know from the Bible. 50 years is a long-term debt cycle. We have generation cycles. And I think that stuff is all coming together 2020. I mean, look at 1971, basically 50 years, that will be 2021. So, So, we can see that the emerging markets basically are crashing already. So it's a question of what is going to happen in the future. Is dollar still, when the dollar is rising, most of the people who have credits in US dollars and foreign currencies, they have a big issue. They cannot repay the debt. When interest rates are going up, then they have a problem to refinance that debt. And now that's basically why we have seen, Turkey, Argentina, and also the other big crises in the past. It has always been the same mechanism. But now I think, everything has an end.
Well, there's a currency war. Wouldn't you say there's wars going on with currency, and China and Russia, and they're trying to get out of the dollar, and they're hoarding gold and building up their gold reserves. Do you believe that, first of all, is there a currency war going on? I think I know your answer. And are they purposely trying to increase the value of the dollar to bankrupt countries and to gain more power?
Well, of course, there is a currency war ongoing for 10 years already. But we have seen basically central banks printing money in, the Fed was talking to the ECB and the Bank of Japan and the European Central Bank. They had it was orchestrated. So they basically all printed money, so debasing the currency. And now when we see China and we see Russia, of course, China most likely has roughly 20,000 tons of gold. And so, that's the geopolitical power shift that we are witnessing for 20 years already. The gold is basically moving west to east. And now we have seen that the Chinese were announcing, that the future oil contracts will be traded in renminbi. In the past, we had two guys trying to go away from the petrodollar. There was Saddam Hussein in Iraq and Gaddafi in Libya. So they have been taken out. China is a bit different and a bit bigger. But they are doing the same now. And they also back it up by physical gold. And that's also the BRICS, the BRICS trading hub, which is renminbi based and also backed up by physical gold. So these are clear signs that we are shifting away, from the empire, so-called United States, that we go from a unipolar to a multipolar world.
Are you having trouble losing weight? It could be due to insulin levels that are out of balance. Learn what fat-flushing food helps balance your insulin levels. It's basically a hormone that determines how much fat your body stores. Over 240,000 women have successfully melted unwanted fat off their body faster than you would think possible, keeping it off for good. Learn how so many people have melted fat so quickly. Click the link below.
Well, now, is it done organically, naturally, just based on power shifts? Or, like after World War II, it went from London or to England to United States, now it's shifting to China. As Catherine Austin Fitts says, they made a decision, the global bankers, that the United States is just a place we can't work anymore. Let's move our stuff to the east and have China be the hub, and let's build it from there. Is that possible? or is it more organic?
No, I mean, I love history. So when you look into who financed Nazi Germany, who financed the Bolshevik Revolution, Anthony Sutton or Professor Dr. Carol Quigley from Georgetown University, Tragedy and Hope. I mean, you have good sources where you see that, the financing has been done by Western entities, big, corporations, that they were always financing those cultural revolutions, I would call. And when it comes to China, of course, I mean, interestingly is, you can go on the Yale University homepage, and you will find under the Yale Chronicles an article 1972 that on the front page says, Mao was a Yale man. So Mao was financed by Yale University. It was the editor of the Yale magazine in China. And at the same time, when you look into, who has been the first ambassador of the United States to China when in 73, when they opened up, the international relationships, it was George W. Bush, for example. And when you look at the big multinational, the CITIC, the Chinese investment fund, I mean, the first bank opening up a branch in China was Rockefeller, Chase. So I think, it's like UK. I mean, UK, the City of London, that's the old power base when it comes to old money. The Brits lost their empire. Then it has been shifted to the United States. And I think, the bankers, they give a shit about the people. I mean, they will always make sure that in this system you can go to up to a certain level, and then basically you try to shift and make sure that you are in the new power structure that you will make there your business. And but I mean, I don't know if we don't know what the future will bring, but there are certain, history gives us at least, some information which makes us think that it's not everything is so easy. So it will be interesting to see what's going to happen in the future.
Well, and the scary part is Mao declared himself dictator for life. So, people should be scared of China knowing that. I mean, that's a pretty serious deal.
When it comes to China, I mean, I have a lot of discussions with people. I mean, that's the historical part. And now also with Xi Jinping, I mean, that he became the president for lifetime right now. You have this One Belt, One Road initiative, which is basically going against the old doctrine of how to control Eurasia. The Brits had a big geostrategist guy that was Halford Mackinder. He always said, the Brits are controlling the empire because they're controlling the seaways. And what they had to avoid was that Europe and Asia become one marketplace. So because Eurasia basically goes from Lisbon to Vladivostok. That's why always they had to separate, Europe from Asia. And I think this is something which the Chinese want to change. And so that's something which is going against the old doctrine, which has, Alfred Mackinder has been copied by Sibrinski with, the empire, the one and single empire. I mean, that's the same doctrine. Literally. And then when you see how many free zones, a lot of industrial zones in China are pretty independent. So you have a lot of competition. So the question is really, where is China going? Is it somehow a steered economy still, in favor of the old power guys when it comes to banking and big multinational companies? Or not. I really don't know. I mean, that the future will show that. So I wouldn't be scared of the Chinese because we really don't know. And even when I talk to Chinese people who are close to liberty and some of them also linked with the Mises Institute, they truly believe, that it's heading in the right direction.
Well, but let's look at a detail here. Peng, I used the wrong name earlier. He didn't like the Falun Gong. Right? And the Falun Gong practitioners were following it's this spiritual practice. It's a lifestyle. It's not a religion. And something like 60% of the people embrace this. But the ones that really followed it, strongly, they persecuted them. And now they're being used for human trafficking and organ trafficking. And there's a lot of, research and very, award-winning journalists and journalism in that area with hard facts in that area. And he was the reason, when I looked into that, he was the reason why why they were persecuted. And essentially, everybody's afraid to even follow that Falun Gong principles anymore. That's the guy that declared himself emperor for life or dictator for life. Those kinds of signals are major red flags.
Well, I mean, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I haven't done the research when it comes to that. I mean, there is a lot of evil stuff going on because it's, we are living in a centralized system, and, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And at the same time, it attracts a lot of sociopaths. And, so that's why you have, those stuff popping up. But I think it's not just one country. It's really within those structures. And, that these sociopaths, yeah.
Well, yeah, they're supplying the world. I mean, and I'm coming from the United States, and we're no Boy Scout, Girl Scout club over here. So, I mean, I get that, but it's, it's some red flags.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, even, I always, if I'm always, we don't know exactly what is happening. I mean, that's why I love history. I love history just to see some trends. Of course, at the end of the day, I have to believe my sources. I have to read a lot of books. I mean, that's what I've done the last 20 years, basically. So that gives you, so you can make up your own mind, but you always no one knows the truth.
Because there's no transparency.
Absolutely.
Right? And so
absolutely,
history, if you can get to the true history,
right,
you're saying is the only time that you really know?
I mean, I like, something which happened over the last few hundred years. I mean, you find a lot of great books, great sources. And so that gives you at least, an indication. And I also believe in the principles of liberty. So, for me, history and the principles of liberty gives me a kind of orientation, how I do business, with how I look at the world. And but I'm always hesitant because even I don't claim that I know the truth. And when it comes to that kind of stuff, I think, we look at everything from a collective point of view. We don't see the individual any longer. And, even there, I mean, in China, I think, maybe there are more people around which have more, in a sense, to do with capitalism, than, with communism. So there is a big dispute. And yeah, so, these kind of topics, the red flag, and then basically just to say, okay, that's a red flag, and it's very dangerous. We should not deal with these guys. I think it's kind of this divide and conquer strategy. So we should always be hesitant. We can follow, we can follow up, we can do the research, and, we can debate. And at the end of the day, that's why we need free speech. That's why we really need free speech, because that's the only way how people can enlighten themselves. When we are free to debate, free to talk, whatever we think, whatever we believe in, and then the better ideas, and I think, are going to prevail. But right now, of course, because there is so much confusion, we have fake news, we have propaganda going on, we have this divide and conquer strategy, we have the oppressed versus the oppressor has been exchanged or replaced by, the LBGT versus the heterosexual, the whites versus the blacks, the Muslims versus, so they want to divide and conquer us. That's the oldest strategy. And let's look into the stuff which basically, where we can claim, where we can see, okay, this is, a lot of sources are talking about it, different books, or experiences or good talks, and all the new stuff which is going on. Sometimes it's so hard to see, what is really behind it, or is it just, propaganda trying to confuse us even more? So that's why I'm always a bit hesitant of and I don't see it just in white and black, because there is much like there is not one opinion that is the only truth. There are, different opinions can be absolutely true, because you can look at a certain topic from all different kinds of angles. And at the end of the day, I see a completely different story than my wife, for example. So that's why we also have to argue quite often. So, yeah.
Well, getting rid of the Federal Reserve is something that many people in our country want to do, right? And one of the questions that I have, and someone said you would be a great person to answer this, is if we overnight nationalize the Federal Reserve, which we could do, and the problem is it's already in place. It's a whole banking structure. So if we just got rid of it and didn't replace it with something else, it would create many problems. But we could nationalize it and it'd already be in place. Would we have to replace the dollar at the exact same time, or could we just simply nationalize it and have a fiat currency in place as it is, and then move to replace or reset the dollar?
I think a nationalization is most likely not going to work anyway. So, I don't see anything good coming from the top. I also believe that governments should not have, they should not be responsible for the monetary system, because you can look back into history. The governments never provided a good monetary system. So we need private money, and the government needs to stay out, and the people. That's all because why do we have money, and how did money came into existence?
Well, our Constitution says that our Congress is the only one that can create money. So for us, we have to change our Constitution first, which is a much bigger hurdle than to just get rid of the Fed.
Right. I mean, listen, look at Switzerland. Our Swiss National Bank, basically it's owned by the government. It's owned by different states. I think, it's at least 80 or 90%. And then you have a few guys who own a share in it, maybe 3 or 4%. But it's a government entity. So it comes close to what Karl Marx had in his 10 Commandments of communism, that the money, the money in the hands of a central government owned central bank. So this is a collectivistic idea. And if the government has the power, or even, in states it's a bit different because you have those private banks owning the shares in the Federal Reserve System. So it's a private entity. So that's even worse at the end of the day. But even if you would nationalize it, it would not change anything.
Well, no, right now we have private people and bankers taking the money away from the country and investing it elsewhere. That's not good for the people. At least if you nationalize it, that interest and those fees would stay in the country.
Yeah,
it's a step better. We can argue all day long whether that's good anyways, but what we got now, where we just got where we're enriching this small group of people who are Luciferians and whatever they are, and using it against us, is total ludicrous.
Look at the example of the Swiss National Bank. They always had a balance sheet of 50 billions. Until 2006, I think still 50 billions. We went off the gold standard in 2000, and today we are standing at 830 billion. Sorry. So they basically 16 times they increased the balance sheet. Everything is under control of the central bank. It's basically owned by the states, but it's of course fully independent, what they always claim. But they haven't done. It's as bad as the others, because it's really, they're printing money, so they're giving money to others, and they basically steal it from somewhere. That's always what's happening when you print money.
But do you think you're controlled though? Are you now controlled by everybody else? Is that the problem? You're not an independent banking system like you thought you were. Do you think you're not being able to operate independently like you had been in the past?
Well,
the politicians in the pocket of all these other people is what I'm asking.
The destruction of the monetary system basically is the easiest way to destroy a society. That's also an old wording. And that's why, I don't know, we will not get out of this system. I don't expect anything good from the top, from the deputy of God on earth. So, I think people should think about what would be, what is it a better solution to have another central bank, but not owned by private banks, but owned by a government entity? I don't think that's a reasonable solution. So they should think, okay, can I be my own central bank? And money basically used to be always a property title. That's why we need money, because we are still trading goods and services, but real goods and real services. But instead that the butcher, had to pay with meat and the baker had to pay with bread, they tried to find the most liquid medium of exchange. And that's how gold and silver, for example, came into existence. And that's also how paper money came into existence, because it always used to be a property title on a certain amount of gold or silver in the past. And now it's just an IOU, or the debt security. And a few people basically can decide in a private or in a nationalized system to print out of nothing and to decide who is going to receive it, at what interest rates, which political groups, whatever. So I think that's the big mistake of our current monetary system.
So I think we're both in agreement that a decentralized money system, something like cryptocurrency, based on everything I've heard you say in the past, would be ultimately the best. But I want to hear your opinion on this. Many believe that we're moving to a crypto society. However, the shift will end up just hurting us in the long run, because we will be a cryptocurrency society controlled by the central bankers anyways, and it will be hell on earth because they're going to be controlling everything.
I mean, the crypto, first of all, for me, I mean, Bitcoin is something. Bitcoin is it's pure digital. It's not backed up by nothing. And, people, value is absolutely subjective. So there are, few nerds, so people who grew up with the internet, the young guys, that they will believe that Bitcoin is money. I think some people will come to that conclusion, and it can become money, but it's not for the majority. So blockchain, for me, is basically a property title. So we are going to digitalize real assets, real services into the blockchain. And that is going to that's basically what Friedrich August von Hayek called the denationalization of money. So, and that's now the trade-off.
Okay, let me just clarify. So basically, if we take every asset we have, because money is just collateral based on something, right? So if you put every asset you have into a blockchain, that becomes money. We're just changing goods and services.
Absolutely. I mean, in the blockchain, I mean, the way I look, I'm thinking about, creating a gold-backed crypto. But that means, that every coin is fully backed by a gram of gold, for example. We are working on stuff like this. So, but it's linked with a physical asset at the end of the day. And it's a property title that people can trade over the internet. It will be stored here in Switzerland or in Liechtenstein. And if the people want to redeem, then they will have the possibility in the future to do that. The problem, so crypto at the end of the day, that brings it back to this denationalization of money, because it's peer-to-peer. So the trade-off with crypto is when it comes to everything is fully transparent. In the blockchain, in that network, basically governments can trace, and based on that, they can also tax. So, taxation will become easier. Everything is transparent, but not only us, but also the government, and those guys will be transparent. It's in the blockchain. You cannot change it. So that's definitely the bad aspect of it. But the positive aspect of it is that they give up the money supply. They give up the monetary system, because people will, if I'm in the gold business, I will hold some of my money in physical gold, and I'm going to trade it through the blockchain, peer to peer with others. And others who are in the steel business, they might decide that steel is money. And, the other guys who are in the grain business, whatever.
Everything is money. It's because right now everything is anyways, because it's collateral for money that has value. As
I said, money at the end of the day used to be always a property title. And because in a barter economy, or in the ancient, or in the past, where we didn't have the money of the internet, because the internet is really, for me, I mean, even there you have people saying, yeah, the internet will allow the government to survey much, much more and to control us much more. That's true. But the trade-off was that they basically lost the information monopoly. They cannot control. I mean, in the past you had the national radio stations, the media, which is owned by 6 companies in the United States, for example. So, and now with the internet, that's why they come up with censorization and, hate speech and all that crap, basically, because they realize that they lose control. And, if you cannot steer the people with propaganda, and they find other information and make up their own mind and can do their own research, that's weakening the centralized structures. And I think that's for me, when I look at the internet, for me, that's the most beautiful part. So even the bad aspects of the internet have been compensated much more by the positive aspects. And I think that is going to happen with blockchain and cryptos in the future.
Well, that's a great analogy, because just like you decentralize information. They can track everything now, which is okay. By decentralizing information with the internet, now they can track everything you're doing. Same thing, you're decentralizing money. They no longer can control the money, but now they can see every flipping thing that you're doing. So that's a trade-off. So how do we, that's scary though.
That's where we are. But at the end, just imagine, printing money, creating, inflating the money supply. That's a hidden tax. Most of the people don't understand what's happening when the government injects liquidity and where inflation is coming from. It's basically always because of the money supply. And this world can only be ruled by a centralized entity if they control the money supply and if they control what is money. So, they're losing that. And now imagine, of course, everything becomes transparent, but now they have to tax the people. And when they tax the people and the people see that and they are not happy with it, then you're going to see, riots, whatever. It's much harder, for centralized institutions. And when you look at the blockchain and the whole idea behind it, it's really decentralization. It's peer-to-peer. So it means in the future, we're going to have decentralized communication. So, people will own their own information and not Facebook and Google and centralized platforms. So we're going to have decentralized law. You can have your smart contracts, and you basically, in that contract, it will be agreed, okay, if you deliver the bananas that you have promised and they're in that good shape, then I'm going to pay for it. The third one is, means decentralized production, and of course a decentralized financial system.
It'll be really interesting because it's a lot of paradigm shifts and it's a loss of control for people, and they're going to try to figure out how to replace that control somehow. I personally do not see the powers that be that control literally our world right now will easily let that control go. I think you have to be really naive to think that that's going to happen in any kind of simple way.
Krugman said back in 1999 that the invention of the internet will not have a bigger impact by 2005 than the invention of the fax machine. So, and the internet was a military invention. It came from the military ARPANET, and blockchain and Bitcoin is also coming from the NSA. The hashtag that they used. So, but at the end. So at the end of the day, what you always see, there are always two sides of a coin. And at the end of the day, it's up to the people. If they understand what it's all about, look the internet. I can browse today completely secure if I want to. I know that when I put something on Facebook or whatever, I know that everyone is monitoring it, that will remain there. So people need to be sensibilized what they are doing when they use the internet. And they are certain, if the people think about it, then they can also protect them in a way. But on the other side, as I said, the internet for me is the Gutenberg press. It's really, it's part of the Enlightenment, which we are seeing right now with Brexit, and we had Trump, and we say fake news, and we see those secession movements, and we hear about libertarism, or we hear about, Mises or whatever. So it's great, Kissinger bombed Cambodia for 1.5 years. It was not a single it was one small article once in the newspaper, but most of the people in the United States, they had no clue that they dropped more bombs on Cambodia than on Germany during the Second World War. So, and now, of course, today, this cannot happen. At the same time, you can abuse the internet to create a fake war. So it's much harder for the people, but at the same time, they have more information. They can do their own research. If they want to dig for the truth, there is, they have everything, all the wisdom at their fingerprint, but they have to decide for themselves what they want to believe in. And if they really want to find out more, then they have to do their own research.
It'll be really fascinating to just watch how this whole thing unfolds. Because, like you said, you don't know, because you don't know what's really going on behind the scenes. It's not transparent. So we don't really know. All we can really do is really look at what the facts are telling us.
Correct. And embrace, I also see, as I said, there is always positive and negative aspects. I think at the end of the day, it's really up to us how we look at it, what we will make out of it. But I think, overall, when I see, the developments over the last 20 years when it comes to internet and now the internet money, I see much more positive aspects than negative aspects overall.
Well, how can people reach you? What do you do to make money? Tell us that. Give us your pitch too, and then how they can reach you.
So, I built up a gold company in the past, and basically I resigned last year, so I became self-sustainable. So what I'm doing mostly is basically I advise clients from all over the world if they want to buy physical gold, and also how to store it. I work with a few selected partners here in Switzerland, 2 in Switzerland, and 1 is in Liechtenstein. But so my people, they always saw gold as a hedge against the dollar. They see it as a hedge against all the risks linked with our current system. So as their monetary insurance, basically, or as their pension fund. So they have a long-term time horizon, and they understand history, they understand the monetary system. And, gold has been money for 5,000 years. Now it's basically demonetized for 50 years. I believe in the long-term history. And when I see the geopolitical power shift with gold, so I truly believe, when you look into the East, why do they buy the gold? Why do the central banks bring back their gold? It's because they know it's money. So I advise clients from retail up to high net worth individual to institutional clients. So that's basically my main business. And right now I'm also looking into the crypto valley and also Liechtenstein, talking to a few cryptocurrencies, market leaders who building up trading platforms and so on. So I have certain ideas when it comes to that, to basically, to offer, to be part, to see what's going on in the future. I want to deal with the right people. I want to deal with people who share the same values, who believe in liberty and freedom, and, in self-responsibility, and, in a sound society, because, sound money, you need sound money for a sound society. If you have fake money, then you have a corrupted society. And, so I'm writing about geopolitics. I'm writing about history. That's how I get in touch with the people. And, so they can always go on my webpage. It's claudiograss.ch. And, so I'm publishing from time to time. And then they can get in touch if they are ever interested in, having a discussion how to protect themselves when it comes to physical precious metals, for example.
Well, do you consult? So you consult people on where to buy and how to buy, and also cryptocurrencies, and kind of where to put their money in both of those markets.
Cryptocurrencies, not. I'm looking into right now how we can digitalize, for example, physical gold, how to put it in the blockchain, so that, because I had clients that were saying, but when the banking system goes down, or when I'm not able to travel, from the States to Switzerland or whatever, or from Italy or wherever, how do I get access to my gold, for example? And so I thought, okay, the crypto and the blockchain business basically allows an additional trading platform for the future, because you cannot block the internet forever. And hackers will always find a roundabout to free the internet, if they have to. And so I'm looking into certain cryptocurrencies to learn more, to meet the right people, and to see what's going on there, and also to see if there are opportunities. But I'm not invested in cryptos at the moment, but I look into different companies which are building up new technologies, new services, which are linked with blockchain and crypto.
Now, do you also help people set up international accounts with their gold or silver?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, because in a lot of ways you want to diversify where you're storing it's not, if you're in the United States, you probably just don't want to keep it in the United States. Is that accurate?
You always had, there were 4 guys in the history who confiscated gold in the last 100 years. One was Roosevelt in 1933. The other one was Mussolini in Italy, Hitler in Germany, and Stalin in the Soviet Union. So Switzerland is a great place because, okay, the banks are everywhere the same. Property rights are only of temporary nature in the banking system. If you're dealing with a private bank who basically is not in the fractional reserve system, and they use collateral, but they are backed up. That's a different story. But the problem when it comes to gold, then you really need the strongest jurisdiction in terms of private property rights. And Switzerland is, the U.S. government, they can decide to go to war, so they can also decide, independently of the people, even independently of the Congress. But so they can also decide in the future if they want to confiscate gold, if they want to. And Switzerland, basically, that will not be possible because our politicians don't have that much power. And I'm also looking into Liechtenstein, which has a monarchy, which is one of the oldest one. It's also kind of it's the same system as in Switzerland, but the guy has a veto power. But he is, for example, a big classic liberal. He believes in secession. He believes in a decentralized state. He sees the state as a service organization. And he also is a big fan of physical gold and silver and classic liberalism. So that's a good basis to start with as well. And so, as I said, everything must be, I always play after the games or play by the games. I tell my people, I don't want to have people trying to hide something, because everything is traceable. So you need to have the right motivation why you want to go into physical gold, why you see it as your insurance, and then it's possible to open up an account, fully legal, fully compliant. But at the same time, you can have much more privacy, and the property rights are stronger than in the banking system.
But if the United States decided they want to compensate gold and they decide that's ours too, even if it's in Switzerland, would they be able to do that?
I mean, based on Swiss law, I mean, then they would have to prove that the Americans did something wrong. And at the same time, I mean, I think a confiscation will only occur when the system is really going down the drain. And how long the state is going to remain in power. Imagine, if you need a few days, no food supply, a big crisis, and you look at the constant divide and conquer strategy. I mean, people are going to shoot each other. And so I don't know how strong and how this apparatus will work in a real crisis and what will come out of it. But of course, the Americans could bomb Switzerland if they want to, if we don't agree or comply with them. So you never have 100%. But I think, it makes sense to think about the future, to come up with the own risk assessment. I truly believe it makes sense to hold certain wealth outside of the jurisdictions you live in. I think it's really adding an additional layer of security. And but of course, no one can give you a guarantee, but we can only prepare for the worst. And I'm always a guy that try to think ahead. And, if I see something is changing in Switzerland, I try to find a plan B so that there will be, other solutions possible.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for sticking around. Will you stick around for another question from my Patreons?
Sure. Pleasure. Thank you very much.